Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for joining us again, guys, in person, and thanks for whoever might be watching us online. Okay, tonight, inshallah, if we get sufficient time, we will finish off the sohbet that we started last week, where we spoke about the notion of, an infinite punishment in hell, okay? Bediüzzaman says that if you accept that hell, there is a minority view that hell might not be of infinite duration, but the majority view is that it will be. If you accept that hell will be of infinite duration, he says, then we can see that infinite punishment in hell is just via these 6 points, okay? So last week we touched on the first couple. So tonight I'll reiterate those first couple of points, and I'll try to finish off as many of the remainder as I can, and then we can, inshallah, have a little bit of a chat at the end. So we'll get straight into it. We saw last time that Bediüzzaman's first point was this notion of the corruption of the ruh, like, here's the situation, right? When Allah is a timeless being, that's the first thing that we should bring to mind, right? He's not bound by the restrictions of time like we are. He has created time for our benefit and for other instances of wisdom. When what seems as though it's in the future for us, or what seems as though it's in the past for us, for Allah, it's all there all at once, okay? This is the view of Bediüzzaman and other scholars. It's all there all at once. Similar to what some physicists today will say, there is this notion of a four-dimensional static block universe. Maybe we can think of the universe like that, for the guys that are familiar with that notion. Maybe we can think of it like that. For Allah, it's all there. It's all there all at once. It doesn't need to wait for the future to transpire. Okay? Something in the past is no less real in Allah's view than something in the present. Okay? Which isn't the case for us. Unless we can rise to a certain level. Now, so what happens? When Allah decrees that He will create certain persons, us guys that have been created, when He makes that decree, He already, immediately, without having to wait for the future, He already knows how you'll use your free will. Okay? He already knows how you will use your free will in what appears to be the future for us. More than that, He even knows how you would use your free will in hypothetical circumstances, okay? We spoke about counterfactuals last time, okay? So, now, what Bediüzzaman's saying is that the person who dies is an unbeliever, right? It is a fact. It is a known fact. Allah knows that that person would have continued to disbelieve even if Allah had have given him infinite life. Okay, so what we can see from that is that this person has got an infinite capacity for wrongdoing, right? He's like a kind of recidivist offender, right? He's like the guy who just keeps going in and out of jail, right? The moment he comes out of jail, he commits another crime and he's back in. Allah knows that is the state of the unbeliever, okay? So, therefore, what that person has done is that they have made their ruh ugly, okay? They have corrupted their own spirit, their own self, to an infinite degree. They have become infinitely ugly. So, straight away, there's one reason why the punishment for that ought to be infinite, right? So, even though it appears as though the crime that he has committed has been committed only in a brief time, the guy might live for 40 years, 70 years, maybe even less. And he commits unbelief, let's say, for all of that time. So, notwithstanding the fact that the crime that he commits is of finite duration, doesn't matter, says Bediüzzaman. The fact is that the nature of his crime, the magnitude of his crime, right, is such that it is deserved of punishment for an infinite duration. Okay, and of course that punishment will be a just punishment. Okay, in no way should we think that his punishment would be in some way unfair. You know, like there might be some talk of unbelievers being tortured in hell, for example. But when we think of torture in the worldly context, we think of something ugly, something bad. So maybe that's not the appropriate expression. Other persons therefore use torments, they use punishments, they use different expressions. Whatever are the punishments of the persons in hell, they will be fair, they will be just, okay? We'll talk more about that later. So that was the first one that we went through. So I'm just going over these briefly because we spoke about them at greater length last time. Okay. Now, the second thing that we said was that when the unbeliever commits unbelief, right, what is the nature of that crime? Like, what kind of a crime is that, right? Well, we said, well, what does the unbeliever do when he denies that Allah exists? Well, he devalues the universe and everything in it. You know, because if Allah exists, then by virtue of the relationship of the things in the universe to their creator, right, those things have all got absolute value, enormous value, okay? But if we say that they are just things that exist without meaning, without any objective value, in fact, they'll be consigned to death, right? If we consign them to meaninglessness, what we do is we denigrate, we devalue each and every single one of those things, right? So that's what the unbeliever does. Okay, so again, you know, actually when we're talking about the world, we can widen that to include not just this world, but actually everything that Allah has created in the seen and unseen realms. Right? Now, the unbeliever says that all that exists is what's here. Right? So in a way, he even devalues that which is in the unseen, you know, like for example, Jahannam or paradise or whatever's in the unseen, you know, things like malaika, things like an immaterial ruh, right? So what is the essence of a human being? Well, we are an immaterial spirit, right? We are a ruh and we have certain immaterial faculties attached to us. He says none of that exists. All that exists is just the atoms and the motions of those particles, those atoms. So he devalues all of those unseen things, you know. Like imagine someone said that, like, you know, you don't exist. Right? So here you are, you exist. He says, you don't even exist to me. Well, that's a kind of devaluing, isn't it? So the unbeliever is committing a crime of infinite magnitude. He is devaluing, taking away the rights, robbing infinite entities of their rights, okay, by devaluing them. So therefore his crime is of the infinite magnitude, deserved of an infinite punishment. Okay. So we'll move on now to the points that we didn't get a chance to go through last time. Now, another thing that Bediüzzaman will say about the universe is this, right? The cosmos, I mean, everything that Allah has created. This is what Bediüzzaman will say, okay? That Allah has created everything, and I believe we spoke about this even last week. Allah has created everything for a couple of reasons, right? For a few instances of wisdom, right? He is the possessor of absolute beauty and perfection. He creates things so that he can behold his own beauty with his own discerning eye. Okay, he wants to see his own beauty with his own discerning eye. Okay, the manifestations of his own beauty with his own discerning eye. But in addition to that, he wants for there to exist conscious beings, other conscious beings that can also see it and that can also enjoy it. All right. So that therefore explains all of the instances of beauty that we have, like all of the good things in the world that we love. You know, starting from the things that we eat, the air that we breathe. You know, the bodies that we're so attached to, that we love so much, that we don't wish any harm to. Things like our consciousness, our intelligence. Who would want to be parted with any of those, right? I mean, how valuable is that to us, right? Imagine your consciousness. Who wants to lose their consciousness? Who wants to lose their intelligence? Who even wants their intelligence to be decreased to the slightest extent? Our ability to do things like love, our sense of justice, all of these things are all gifts that Allah has given us. Together with every particle in the universe, every star, every planet, everything that Allah has created, right? Especially things like our parents, our friends, obviously our children. All of these things have been created so that we can perceive Allah's beauty and perfection, so that we can come to know what kind of a being Allah is and to love Him because of that and to express that love through worship. Hey? Okay, so that is why everything exists. Now, so when the unbeliever devalues these things, what he's doing is he's turning his nose up at the most valuable of gifts. An infinite number of gifts, each one of them of infinite value. Do you need to stop or? Okay, so think about it like this, right? Even think of like just the simplest gift that persons give to one another. Like, if you were to buy your wife a bunch of flowers, buy your child a gift, buy your wife a gift, any person a gift, right? And they were to devalue that, they were to say, it's rubbish, okay? It's nothing, it's meaningless, right? It has no real value. If they were to say that, you'd be deeply offended, wouldn't you, right? So now this is what the unbeliever does, right? Vis-a-vis Allah. Allah has created everything in the universe, including all the things I mentioned, all of your faculties, your children, your parents. He's created all of that so that He can behold His own beauty, but also so that you can enjoy His beauty, right? He's done that for you, right? And yet you snub it, you turn your nose up at it, right? You treat it as though it's not valuable at all. And you do that 1 trillion times over. Right? So you devalue an infinite number of things. Okay? Don't forget, the afterlife is going to be full of bounties forever. Right? And that is what is in store for the believers. You turn your nose up at all of that. You say it doesn't even exist. Okay? It's just the product of the imagination of, it's wishful thinking on the part of believers. Okay. There's this fifth point, right, about sullying the ruh. Okay. Now, let me read it. Actually, I neglected to do so at the last point. Let me read this directly from Isharatul Ijaz, right? Ala Rasulina sallallahu. Bismillah. Okay. As indicated by the hadith, the heavens and the earth contain me not, yet I am contained in the heart of the believer. The human conscience is in regard to its outer face limited and finite, but by virtue of its reality, the roots of its inner face spread and extend to eternity. In this respect, therefore, it is infinite. Unbelief, however, sullies it and dwindles it away. So, but this is much talking about your being, right? Your spirit, your ruh, and the faculties that it's got. Remember we spoke about them and how valuable they are? Okay, so now, the essence of a human being is this immaterial ruh. Okay? Attached to this are certain faculties. For example, there's heart, right? Heart is the seat of love and hate, and it should be reserved for Allah. Okay? And there are other faculties, right? You've got this thing called vijdan, conscience, right? It tells you when you're about to do something wrong, it triggers, it activates, and it tells you, hey, what you're about to do is wrong. Okay, and you've got intelligence, you've got consciousness, right? You've got hands and feet and teeth, and right? All of these are faculties that have been attached to you. Some of them physical and some of them non-physical. Right? Know that these faculties, particularly the immaterial ones, right? The physical body will be renewed, but the immaterial faculties, your conscience, your heart, right? These things have been created not just for this world, right? they're actually things that have been created for eternity. It looks like we are a finite being created for, a finite world. That's not actually the case. Right? What does the believer believe in relation to the afterlife? Like, what do we say about paradise, right? Jahannam? We say this, that it is an arena in which you will continue. Like, remember we said a moment ago that Allah has created things in this universe for us to come to know Him and love Him, to see His beauty and perfection, to love Him for that result, because of that. Well, the point of Jannat, of the afterlife, is for us to continue that journey infinitely. Right? You've got an infinite being that can manifest infinite beauty and perfection, and so therefore that kind of a being requires for there to be an infinitely lasting realm where that can continue. Right? No finite realm will do justice to a being like that. So that's the sort of world that is in store for us, and the faculties that we're being given are geared toward that. Right? And that's why we've kind of got this desire for immortality. That's why we're not satisfied. We're never satisfied. Don't we notice that, right? So, for example, you go on a holiday. Do you ever want that holiday to end? Right? You engage in some pleasurable thing, some enjoyable thing. Look, who wants to be parted from their loved ones? Do you ever want to be parted from your loved ones? Never, right? So we have got this love of immortality, this love of perfection, right? We love beauty, we love perfection, we love goodness, and we want it to continue forever. That's how Allah's created us, right? Now, remember we said right back at the start that what does the unbeliever do? Right? He sullies these faculties, right? He dirties them, he corrupts them, okay? He makes them ugly, right? He becomes the sort of person who is not fit for that kind of a realm. And as what I've said in the interlude, right, that is a huge waste. Right? So you have been created to come to know all of Allah's names, right? Forever in an afterlife. But what you've done, you've taken your ruh and you've damaged it to such an extent that you are not fit for that realm. Right? We'll talk about that more in a moment. You are not the kind of being that's fit for that realm. It's not appropriate to put you in that realm. It'd be impossible for Allah to put you in that realm. Right? So you've wasted those faculties which were created for eternity. And yes, the unbeliever will continue to abide. Right? He will abide in Jahannam on this one's view forever, but only certain of Allah's names will be made manifest to him there. Okay? He will miss out on much. Right? He's only going to perceive certain names of Allah, that pertain to His justice and His punishment and so on. And he has basically wasted his faculties, right? So again, don't look to the length of time for which the crime was committed, but look to the magnitude of this crime here. Look how badly the unbelievers acted. Look how much damage he's done. Look at the grandness of the wastage here, right? Okay, so that's that point. There is a final one. Now, I'll quickly read it. Although opposites stubbornly resist each other, they are similar in many instances. Thus, on the one hand, belief yields the fruits of the delights of paradise, and on the other, belief produces everlasting suffering and pain. So we've kind of touched on this already. Right? Allah does not put a person somewhere in vain. Right? When we think of, remember I said last week that what we're doing in this presentation, right, we're answering only one of three questions that Bediüzzaman poses. Right? He's saying, is it just for Allah to put the unbelievers in hell forever? Right? To punish them in hell forever? Right? Is it just to do that? There are other questions. Is it wise to do that? Is there any wisdom in that? And also, where's the mercy in that? Isn't Allah meant to be an all-merciful being? How is that merciful? Right? So we've only been looking at the justice issue. Right? So now when we think of justice, this is what generally comes to mind, right? Generally what comes to mind is just that, the righting of moral wrongs, like when a judge puts a guy in jail, what's he doing? He's exacting justice. He's bringing about justice, like a certain wrongdoing has been committed against some member of the community, and that wrong is being attempted to be righted, okay? And that is part of justice, right? That is part of what it means to be just, but the concept is richer than that, right? Bediüzzaman and other scholars, they've always held this view, right? Throughout the history of Islamic theological scholarship, this view has always been held, right? That part of what it means for Allah to be just, like part of what his adalat entails, is the placement of things in their right place, right? The putting of things in their right place, the giving of correct measure, right? Right proportion, right balance. All of this pertains to justice, right? And when we look out in the universe and we see like this beautiful, this mathematical elegance to the way the universe has been structured, that physicists and mathematicians marvel at, that is a manifestation of Allah's justice, okay? Which might, be surprising to us. So now, when Allah says that the believer will go to Jannat, right? Know this, that it's not out of right? Deservedness. Like, it's not for that, right? Don't think that the good that you do in some way obligates Allah to put you somewhere. Like, for example, if I say to my son, if you eat your dinner, I'll let you play with your iPad, And then he eats his dinner, and then I refuse to let him play with his iPad, that, I've kind of acted unjustly against him because he deserves to play with it, right? He did what I asked him, so he deserves to play. Is that the sort of situation that exists between Allah and the Ahl Jannat? No, it is not, right? It's not that, and it's partly for this reason, that the bounty that Allah will give to the believers in Jannah is so great, right, that what you do could never be such that you deserve that, okay, right? Nothing that you do, right, is such that you become deserving of Jannah. But what, for example, I think a professor in Turkey, a Risale student by the name of Alaaddin Bashar, Professor Alaaddin Bashar, he puts it like this. I read this recently on his website, that, the fact that you don't deserve a certain thing, right? The fact that you don't deserve it, you do certain actions, and those actions are not such that they make it that you deserve a certain reward. That doesn't stand in the way of Allah taking those actions into account when he gives you something. Okay? So Allah says, act in this way and I will give you Jannat. Right? So he's not giving it to you because you deserve it. He's just chosen freely to take that into account. Right? He's not obliged to. He freely chooses to take that into account. Right? So Allah has, in his wisdom, actually I shouldn't just say in his wisdom, in accordance with all of his names, right? All of Allah's names are such, right? That it necessitates that there exists this realm called Jannat, right? And that is the appropriate place for the believer. In Allah's wisdom and mercy, his generosity, for example, is so great that it necessitates that there should be a realm like that, and that the believers who have obeyed their Lord and done what is asked of them, that they be given that. Well, but just I'm saying that, the flip side of that coin is this. The flip side is that if that's the case, well, then it's the same thing vis-a-vis Jahannam. Right? Whereas in this case, they do deserve it. Okay? So there is, the issue of desert is there now. Right? Now, they've done certain wrongs. Okay? They've done certain wrongs. And they do deserve punishment for those wrongs. But more than that, Allah's adalat necessitates that they go into hell for this reason, that is the appropriate place for them. Part of Allah's adalat is that the right thing be put in the right place, right? Because, and we can make this acceptable to the heart like this. Let's say a person commits some ugly crime against a loved one of yours, right? Some person slaughters your whole family, and the justice system, the judge, the police, whoever, they go and reward this guy. Okay, he's killed your whole family, and they go and reward him. They say, for that, you will be given a palace in the best part of town, or whatever, right? Is that appropriate? It's not the right place for that guy. It's just not the right place for him. Well, it's the same thing with the unbelievers, and I believe that's what Bidisman's getting at in that point. So, in that sixth point. So that's all I've got. I think I've spoken for long enough. I'll end it there, and I'll hand it over to you guys if you want to say anything, inshallah. Let's stop it. Allah razı olsun.